So I'm working on a new painting, and it's going to be the grandkids in a mountain in front of a lake type scene. And I always tell my students, try not to do paintings when you're first learning how to paint of something that's you're very emotionally attached to, because it's very hard to get it, because you get past, you're not thinking as an artist, you're thinking more emotionally, and sometimes when you do that, your painting suffers because you're not critical on just working your values and stuff like that. You're thinking more of the emotional aspect of the painting or drawing, and so it's always very, very risky to do something of people that you're very attached to, because very often you don't get the likeness, and that's usually because you're thinking more emotionally in the drawing than you are thinking as far as just getting the technique and process down. And so, and that's a little bit of my problem right now, is I'm fairly happy with how Emma's face is going, but Caleb's face I'm having issues with. And there's always one. You get one that works and the other one either never works, or you spend the entire time struggling with it, trying to get it to work. And right now I am struggling with his face. And so I may have to do that as I'm painting, because I started erasing and redrawing, and now I've probably got myself worked into a hole here, and so I'll just have to just paint over it and go with it with the paint. I can't rely on how good or poorly I did the drawing here. So I'm just trying to add a few values in here to remind me where the shadows are going to be. As I'm working this. And so I'm still trying to work this whole thing out. And so the figures are most important. The background isn't as big of a deal. I'm not too worried about that as much. But if I can't get the likeness, then the whole painting's failed. And it's a huge canvas, and so I'm trying to work some of this out ahead of time. I'm trying to get it to look like them. And in your mind, you always have what you think they look like, but when you go to draw it, your emotional perception of them is different than the actual working out the actual drawing. I don't know if that makes sense. It's just the way it is. When you're dealing with something and so it's like I have students come in and they bring their puppy in, or a picture of their cat and they want to paint or draw it. And I always say no because they get too emotionally attached to the drawing and they're not thinking critically on technique and process. And a lot of times when you're more emotional with the drawing, all the process and technique go out the window. They're just gone, you know. And so it's just, you know, you want to think about composition and all those technical things that you're trying to deal with, but you don't because you're thinking more of the emotional side of, you know, how much you love the puppy or dog, you know. And here it's grandkids, you know, and there's nothing wrong with doing paintings of people you really care about. It's just you need to keep in mind that it can be more difficult to get, you know, the figure down right, and then you can deal with the emotional side of it. You know, once you have everything working and it's not a disaster, sometimes it is, and you know, then it's all working for you. But boy, it's always a risk doing things people you know. That's why I like doing the Native Americans, because I don't care if it looks like the person. That's not important. I get the general gist, and I just have fun laying colors and things like that. Here, I have an emotional preconception of what I want, and getting that to work is a lot harder because of that. You know, getting the painting to work. It's just, sometimes it ends up being a nightmare, and it's frustrating, but it does push your skills, it does push your abilities to try to work through that. And most of the time, I would rather not bother, not have to deal with that, and just have fun painting. And here, it's going to be a little harder because it is my grandkids, and I've been putting off painting them for a while now. Now they're getting old enough to where they'll look like something like they are when they're adults, and they'll be able to recognize themselves. When they're younger and just toddlers, it's really hard to get the likeness good enough to where it looks like they would be when they're adults. And so I usually never do little toddlers, you know, anywhere from 4 years old and up. Then they very much look like they'll have a characteristic of, more characteristics of their actual likeness. And so, you know, trying to get this all to work. I hope it works. If it doesn't, I'll be pulling my hair out and saying, why did I choose to do them? I don't know. Sometimes I'm a little crazy. That's why that's why artists are a little crazy, is they try to do things that don't necessarily work all the time. So this is going to be definitely probably a longer painting, because I'll spend a lot of time putting layer after layer after layer on it and trying to get this as perfect as I can get it, which is going to push my abilities, which is good, but it's going to take a lot longer to do this painting than it would if I did a Native American in a landscape type scene, because I really don't care what the person thinks. Here I've got to please, grandma, and then I also have to please mom and dad, and then eventually the grandkids, when they get old enough, they have to please them enough to where they think it's good enough, you know. And so you're people pleasing all these different people that have their opinion on how it should be painted, which brings in a whole nother kind of headache. Um, and sometimes you just have to have thick skin as an artist and say, well, actually, I don't care about your opinion anymore. I'm just trying to get it as good as I can get it, and if I'm satisfied, that's going to have to be where it goes. And when you do portraits of people, you're always trying to people please what their preconception, what they think a portrait should look like, which may not necessarily be any good at all, you know. So either you have to convince them to get them past that and get them to have some understanding of art and how art works, because most people don't have an art background or any kind of art training in high school or grade school, you know. And so it's just that they don't understand. You know, sometimes what you're trying to do, what you're trying to get accomplished. So we will see if I can pull this off. Sometimes you don't know. Now I'm liking how Emma's working here. It's looking more like her. That's kind of her. And then I think I'll be able to adjust when I get to doing painting some of what's happening here. She has all this flyaway hair that kind of twirls around her face. And Caleb here, I don't know, I'm not getting his mouth right. And it's going to be a toughie because all this little, because when you're dealing with a portrait in something this size, it's really hard to do little fine detail. I'll have to take the smallest brush I have and just put dabs, trying to get that structure of the face to work. Otherwise, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. That's why making larger paintings is easier for the artist, but it's harder to sell in the end game because nobody wants a painting this big, you know. Well, their mom and dad's just gonna have to deal with it if they want the painting or not, or you know, it'll get stuck on my wall for a while, and then maybe in a closet until they get old enough to where they may want it. Sometimes they like it and want it, and sometimes they go, yeah, that's nice, and then you never hear anything about it. So we'll see. I'm trying to get this work. So I have lots of detail in the landscape that I have to deal with too, that I am not getting in here yet. Snowfield here. Maybe I'll deal with that when I start painting. We'll see. So I've been working on my my figures, because if I don't get those right, then there's no sense in moving on with this painting. And it's looking pretty good. I'm still having some issues of getting likeness, which is always a problem. You know, when you really want it, sometimes it just isn't there. And sometimes it's just a slight adjustment of value that makes it work. So I'm, kind of happy with both these. They look like they're about there, but still trying to work out all the small adjustments here. And if I can get those to work, I can breathe a sigh of relief. But right now, I'm still just trying to get this. I'm just using the smallest brush I have to get this to work. Like that. Just small changes and make a big difference. So Emma here has, lots of wild straggly hairs that I want to bring in. But I don't know, I think I'm going to have to wait until this dries before I can add a lot of this texture in here. Small little changes. Now, her face, both their faces are just a little on the dark side, and there's a reason for that. Is you want to creep up on your highlights slowly. If you go for your highlights too quickly, like that, just didn't work. It throws off a lot of what you're trying to do here. It throws off the color harmonies and all that stuff, and so you always creep up on your highlights when you're doing oil paint slowly. You don't want to hit it right off the bat, because you have all this negative space you have to put in here yet to see how that works before you can put the highlights in. It's one of those little tricks I've learned through lots of experience of carefully bringing in the highlights. So right now I'm working on midtones and shadows, and I'll probably drop in highlights as I get further along here. Okay, a lot of clear lights here to change things. Yeah, it's getting there. It's starting to look like Emma. That's looking like Caleb. And hopefully I can just make a few changes here. Just a few changes to try to get the structure to look a little better. stuck my hand in a bunch of paint. So I finally got the figures looking a little closer to what I want them to be. I'm trying to put in some of the negative space. As I put in the negative space, I see that, you know, Emma's face is probably just a slightly little bit too dark, so I'll raise the highlight up like I had talked about a little bit, and I'll play with the dress a little more as I go. But I need to add some color and value in here so I can judge for if that's correct or not. And so I'm just trying to block out some of my rocks that I've got going here and try to figure out where all the shadows are, and just just working through it. It's just a matter. I'll probably get a lot of this foreground detail done because it's really complicated. The rest of it's pretty simple. It's just big block areas. There's some detail in here that I want to put in because that's the focal mountain. The mountain that's going to take the most interest after the figures. So that's secondary focus. This is the primary focus. And so I'm trying to get these levels of foreground, middle ground, and then way background, and get that working. So it's getting there, and it's just a matter of being patient and just working through the process. And it's just a dab of paint here, dab of paint there, and just keep building all these different levels of color. I've got a warm color here, I've got cool color here, and so I'm just building this all in. As I go. Change that shadow here a little bit. Well, it's just going to take time. So I have a lot of the negative space done here. I'm working on a lot of the water in here yet. A lot of that needs to be refined. I need to work on all the pebbles. I have little gravelly things that are going on here. So they need a highlight and a shadow on each one of these little things. And I'll need to adjust some of the color in the sand in the background. And I'm fairly happy with how these rocks are working. These still need to be added. Some work on the shadows in here. It's going to take a little while, and some of the color here isn't right. So I'll probably spend a whole day on still working this negative space. And then I really want to I'm getting anxious to get up here and try to work this top part of the composition into the bottom part, and how I'm going to do that color-wise and things. I'm thinking that I want a warmer sky rather than a cool blue sky up here, and so my clouds are going to have lots of reds and purples in, I think. But I don't want to get too overpowering because I don't want that to detract from the main focal point, which is the kids and then the mountain. And so this has to be a supporting role, not a dominant role up here. So I need to get this to lay back and calm down while this is the point of interest in here. And it's, I've got little shadow accents I want to put in here, and you have reflections in the water I want to add in. And I'm real happy with how, getting draw, trying to do something that's underwater compared to something that's above the water is totally different. The contrast is much lower, and the shadow colors are different, and so still need to think about how I'm doing that over here and bring it in and pull it in over here too. Besides trying to get the reflection in the water and and little waves and things that are happening. It'd be easier not to deal with any waves, but the waves will add a little more action in here. So I'll have to bring that over the top of some of these rocks. Besides getting this reflection of the mountain coming down and getting that to read right yet. So I have the rocks on the left side and the water pretty much the way I want it until I can get the mountains in. And then I have all the little pebbles in the foreground going. I just need to work the rocks on the left side behind Emma in the water to get that closer to what I want. And then I'll start working mountains. This is what it looks like further away, and when you get closer to these, you can see the brushwork and how everything looks here. Trying to create that feeling of water or exposed rocks. Pebbles are just dots and dashes of light and dark shapes. So I'm working on this landscape here. I'm going to pull this off the side so you can see. And I've got most things working. I'm fairly happy with my rocks, and my water needs a little help in here. This mountain is the color is too strong, and so I need to gray this out and send it back in the distance a little more. But the sky's looking pretty good, and that's coming along. I need to add a few highlights on the figures here and touch the faces just a little more, because these need a little more developing. And then I think I'll be getting a lot closer done. I need to add richer colors in here, and these are just slight adjustments. They're not real huge, and so I'm just working on a little more structure in this side of the mountain. This side of the mountain needs to gray out more rather than these greens being so strong. And so I'll need to gray these greens down a little bit, and that'll cause them to sit back a little more. And then I may bring up some of the greens on this side to make them come forward just a little bit. But it's I'm trying to get things balanced, get things working together. I want to play with this water here. This is way too bright, and add a little more color maybe in here, and I'm fairly happy with that area, but it's getting closer to being completed. So I changed the value of the colors in the mountain here. I cooled these off and kind of warmed these up, and so that's working a little better. I worked on these mountains and played with the sky a little bit, and then I worked a little bit on the water. I still need to do more on that, but that's kind of where we're at right now. And a lot of this is just adding layers on top of layers on top of layers, which gives the painting a little more depth rather than doing one layer. Like here, this is mostly just one layer and done. But the more layers you put on, the more varied colors you have, the more interest you create, and the more depth that and dynamic that you create within the painting. Yep, looking pretty good. So I think I'm done with this one. I can't think of what else to do, what else to make it any better. And it's always tough when you're dealing with people and you're trying to get the likeness perfect, and sometimes you get it, and sometimes it's just not as good as what I'd like it to be. But it looks like the kids, and the mountain, and the depth, and the water, and the rocks, all those things are working in this. And so I think I'm going to call it quits for a while. I may play with it a little, do little dabs here or there as I have it hanging up just to look at. And but this is pretty much it. So I'll do close-ups. It's Emma. And Caleb with his truck. He's always got a truck in his hand. In the water. And the mountain. So if you liked the video, please hit the like button and or the subscription. That always helps. And we'll see you in the next painting.